Today I'm going to show you how to create this procedural sci-fi floor or wall texture. There's a lot of stuff we can customize here. We'll even have a couple of seed values that you can flip through for different variations. This is what our node setup is going to look like. So if you're new to working in the shader editor, this might be a little overwhelming, but feel free and ask questions if you have them. And if you like what I do, feel free and support me on my Patreon or Gumroad pages. All my blend files are available there as well. To set up our scene, I'm going to get rid of this cube and bring in a plane instead. Let's change this whole middle area to the shader editor and put that material that was on our cube onto our plane. Hit N to get rid of this shelf. And I'm going to change the top right to my 3D viewport. Make it a little larger. Oops. Zoom in. I'm just going to reset that 3D cursor. And scroll down to where it says World Properties. And we're going to bring in an HDRI as well. Let's go to Color and click on Environment Texture. Then click Open. And I've just got some HDRIs that I downloaded from hdrihaven.com. And I'm going to use Palermo Sidewalk 2K. So go ahead and click that in, and it'll load in and light your scene. And I'm just going to get rid of this light as well. I don't really need that anymore. Click back on my plane. I'm going to go to the Render Properties and change to the Cycles Render Engine. I'm going to change it from Supported to Experimental, and GPU as well. But if you don't have access to a GPU, don't worry about it. It's just a little faster for me. I'm going to go to the modifier properties and click on subdivision surface, click on simple and adaptive subdivision. And then I had the levels viewport at 6 there. Then come down to the, what is this, the material properties? Yeah, just scroll down here and let's change it from where it says settings, change it from bump only under displacement to displacement only or displacement and bump. I just added on displacement only. One last thing I want to do is hold down Z and go into rendered mode. You have to have your mouse cursor over your 3D window to do that. And then you can notice that you can see that the HDRI is in the background there. I wanted to light my scene but not be in the background. So I'm going to go to the world properties, go down to ray visibility, and just unclick where it says camera. So that's all we got to do for setup. Now we can start working on our texture. So just hit Shift A to bring something in. I'm going to search for a wave texture. Just bring this guy in here, and we can view this with Control Shift left click by left clicking on this node here. And that's a node wrangler shortcut. So if that's not working, you just need to go to Edit and Preferences and Add-ons and just search for node wrangler here and just make sure this is checked. So anyways, with this selected here, I can hit Control T, which is another node wrangler shortcut. And I'm just going to plug object into that mapping node. On this wave texture, the only thing I'm going to change for now is just changing it to Y instead of X. And this is the main angle that I'm going to be viewing things from, just kind of the default front angle. If you hit 1 on your number pad and then 8, just kind of, goes to about this angle. In fact, that'd be a good camera setup. If you went 1 and then 8 and then Control Alt number pad 0, just set your camera to your view. So basically, when I was setting this up the first time, I just wanted to make like an interesting grating texture. So, I was using a lot of wave textures and basically displacing them. So just brought in a displacement node, and I'm going to plug this into the height instead. And if we view this on our principled BSDF and plug this displacement into the displacement input on this material output, we can see that it's done something to our mesh here. It's basically displacing it much more than I want it to be displaced. So let's go ahead and adjust that. I mean to put that way up there, but let's go ahead and change this scale to 0.1. So now we can see, it's a little easier to make out what this is doing. It's just creating this sawtooth pattern. So the way this is working so far, if we look at the wave texture, we can see these black parts here. Those are the lowest points, and the white areas are the highest points. We can see it's kind of a linear relationship. If you orbit around this and just tab twice, you'll reset the position. That's to do this adaptive subdivision. It changes depending on where the camera is. I'm going to manipulate this black and white pattern a little bit with a color ramp. So I'll just search for that and just bring it in here. And the only thing I'm going to do is bring this black up to 0.5. Oops. So 0.5 right there. And if we view this here, we can see, it's a little bit of a different pattern. Let's turn the displacement off for a second, actually. Let's go like that. No, not 0.10. So we can see basically that black area has widened and nothing's really happened to the white. So the result is, basically a flatter bottom area there. We can make a flatter top area as well. If we wanted to drag the white across, you can see it's much more rigid there. But I'm just going to leave that at 1 for now. going to grab this wave texture and color ramp and hit Control-Shift-D so that I duplicate both of them. And I'm going to change the Y to X and the scale from 5 to 2. And then for this color ramp, I'm going to change the black value to 0.35, and I'm going to bring the white down to 0.41. So if you look at this, it's a much larger pattern than this first one, and it's going the opposite way because I set it to X. And the bands are a little bit more even because these are both closer to the middle. I'm going to bring in a mix RGB and place it after this color ramp on the top. And I'm going to feed this bottom color ramp into the factor on this mix RGB. And this right here, I'm just going to set this to white. So what this is doing is it's basically saying, anywhere where there's, if we look at this texture, anywhere where there's black, we're going to see this pattern. But anywhere where there's white, we're just going to see white. So just pay attention there. We're going to see black right here and white right here. And now basically there's no displacement right here. There's only displacement right here. So we can kind of control it with this second wave texture and the scale value right here. If we wanted this larger, just decrease that scale. If you're noticing that it's running a little slow in the viewport, you could change this levels viewport number as well. Just turn this down. It just means you won't get as accurate a preview in the viewport while you're working on it. So just render more frequently. But it works okay with mine turned up, so I'm going to leave it at 6 for now. I'm going to give myself a bit more room to work. Just move these over here and these guys down here. And once I've got these highlighted as well, the wave texture and the color ramp, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-D to duplicate those again while leaving them attached here. And I'm going to change this to Y and just change the scale back to 5. On this color ramp, I'm going to bring the black all the way to 0, and the white is going to come way down as well. It's going to be at 0.03. So if we look at this, we can see it's a whole bunch of really skinny black bands there. I'm going to bring in a math node and place it right here, and we'll run the color ramp into that value there, the color ramp from the middle there. So we can see what it's doing. It's basically creating these slices along the x-axis, but it's a little bit too much, so I'm going to duplicate this math node, change it to multiply by you open this up and you hit M, and it changes to multiply. I'm going to change this to 0.1 for now, so we can still see it, but it's not affecting our mesh too much there. I'm going to grab this color ramp at the bottom that's attached to this wave texture, set to X and 1. And I'm going to hit Control-Shift-D, duplicate that. We're going to do a whole bunch of stuff here, so I'm going to reset this. So I'm going to grab this black and bring it up to 0.67. And I'm going to bring this white and bring it down to 0.682. Then I'm going to bring in another value and just move it up a little bit here. This is going to be at 0.755. This is also going to be white, so I'm just going to drag this up. And then let's do another black value here. Move it up there. This is going to be at 0.769. We'll just change this to black. And then add another value here, another white value. This is going to be at 0.778. So change that to white. And I'll add another white value here. Change that to white, and that's going to be at 0.836. And I guess I'll just go grab, oh, I guess, never mind. I thought that was going to grab a black value. So I'm just going to change that to black again, and this is going to go at 0.85. And then we'll do another white value here, just drag that up, change it to white, and let's change this value to 0.863. And then I'll do another white value, drag it up there, change it to white, and this is going to be at 0.949. Then I'll do another black value at 0.964, and one more white value. At the very top, we're going to change this to 0.976 and change that to white. So I'm just going to cycle through all 11 points here with this. Just make sure they're set to white and black. Let's take a look at what we set up here. I'm going to view this, and it's these black bands with a little bit more detail here, black and white areas. And I'm going to grab this band here, duplicate this multiply, and place it right before the other multiply. And then I'm going to run this color into that value down there. Basically what we've got is we've got these lines going this way and these lines going this way. So they're cutting these up into, what could be, I don't know, tire tracks or lights or whatever you want really. But you can see the detail if you zoom in here and tab twice. You can see those areas are starting to form. So I'm going to set up another color ramp that's not quite as bad as this one, but it does still have some detail. So I'm going to duplicate this and just reset it completely. And let's work on that. The black is going to be at 0, and this white is going to be at the top, or close to the top. Actually, it's going to be at 0.962. Nope, didn't mean to change the black. So let's select the white and go 0.962. Then I'm going to bring 3 points in here, and I'm going to set the first one at 0.67. The second one is going to be at 0.765, and the third one is going to be at 0.85. And these shades here don't actually matter too much, but I had them at 0.1 value, 0.2 value, and 0.3 value. So I'll just set those up. One thing I forgot to do as well is change this to ease, that really complicated color ramp. And this one that we just set up, let's change this to constant. If you look at this, we can see these bands here of constant values, no gradients really. And the reason I set this up is because I wanted to send it into a white noise texture. And what that allows us to do is if we set it to 4D, we get different values of color or different values of gray depending on what seed we have here. And it's just between 0 and 1. So I'm going to set this white noise texture to 0.3, but really you can set it to whatever you want. And I'm going to bring this value over and attach it to the scale input of this wave texture here that's going into this color ramp where everything's at the bottom there. Then I'm going to use Shift and right click and drag through some of these areas here to create some reroute points, just to make this a little easier to read. So if we look at the result, it'll probably be easiest to look here. We can see that now these are being stretched by random amounts, and it's a little small too, the number is a little small, so it's kind of a large pattern. So I'm going to duplicate one of these multiply nodes, place it right here, and change this to 10. So now it's a little easier to see what's going on. These are a random length compared to these here, and if I switch through different settings here, I get different variations. This is our rendered progress so far. I'm going to grab this multiply node here and just duplicate it, place it in the middle here, because I want to create one more kind of area of random variation here. I'm going to duplicate this white noise texture, and we'll change this to a different seed. I mean, you don't have to, but I'm going to. And I'm just going to put it into the multiply right here. This is going to create a variation in height as well. So let's just render that out and see what it looks like. This is what it looks like now. You can see some areas have kind of disappeared here when compared to the previous picture. And the reason, let's actually look at that. So I'm just going to close this. It's because if we look at this white noise texture here, there's some areas that are kind of darker. And, this area is a little bit darker, not as dark as this middle area. So if we change the seed, we would get different values here. Something like this would look totally different. So if you're not happy with the way it's set up, just try switching that around, see what different results you can get. I'm going to create one more wave node, and I'll just grab this one right here. Just Control-Shift-D so that it remains attached, and I'll make one more reroute there. And I'm going to leave this on X there, but I'm going to change the scale to 40. So this is going to be a higher frequency one. The pattern is going to be much smaller. I'm going to run this into a color ramp. Let's bring that in, and I'm going to change the white to 0.15. So we can see the lines have gotten a little skinnier there, the black lines. Then I'm going to, so let's move this down a little bit here. And I'm going to bring in another color ramp that's attached to this wave texture up here that's set to 1. And I'll just reset this. This is going to be a fairly simple one. The black is going to be at 0, and the white is going to be at 0.96. And I'm just going to reset this to constant. So we can see what this looks like. Just these skinny white bands. I'm going to bring in a mix RGB, place it right here, and this is going to go into color 2, and this is going to go into the factor. So if we see what's going on here, we can see this pattern is just in the very center where those white bands were. And then this is going to be white. So yeah, everywhere that this factor isn't touching, everywhere where this was black is just going to be white. I'm going to shift all three of these multiply nodes over slightly. I'll make room here, just move everything over. And I'm going to add one more multiply right here because that's where this mix RGB is going to plug in, just right there. So let's see what that looks like rendered out. The difference is really subtle at this point. It'll be easier to see when we develop the colors a little bit more, but we basically created these grooves that run this way, just in this little area right here. So we're doing pretty good. There's only one more part that I want to do for my displacement. So I'm just going to create a reroute point here and a reroute point here, and maybe just organize this slightly, make it a little easier to see what's going on. And I'm just going to do something right here before these two wave textures. I'm going to bring in 3 nodes. I'm going to bring in a separate XYZ, place it here, and then a noise, not a white noise, just a regular noise texture, place it here, and then a mix RGB, and I'll just place it right there. So the Y is going to go into the vector there, and it's also going to go into color 2 right here, because I lost my preview there. And then this mix factor, we'll set this at 0.9, and we'll set this scale at 0.1. So all I'm really doing here is making it so these gratings, these ones that go along the x-axis, appear at more random intervals. And if I turn this down, it would be even more noticeable. But let's render that out and see what it looks like at 0.9. Still looks a little subtle. I'm just going to turn up the effects so you can see better what it's doing. I'm going to change the noise scale to 5. And let's change this to 0.8. Let's re-render that. There we go, much more noticeable now. You can see it's not only affecting these areas here, it's also affecting these little grooves in these areas in the middle as well. So it's an optional idea for you. If you want, you can just crank this to 0 or take this out completely. It's up to you. If this is at 1, it's not even going to affect anything. So I'm going to put it back to 0.9 and to 1. It's really not even doing that much at this point, but I'm just keeping it in there as an option for myself. Okay, there we go. That's everything that we have to do to set up the displacement. And I guess one other thing I had is I had this at 0.5. You can see what it's doing. It's just widening the bands along the x-axis. So I had that at 0.5. You can do whatever you want, but this is just what I had for my final render. So let's start labeling stuff. I'm going to grab all of this here and hit Control J, and we'll just call this displacement. Just hit F2, and we'll just type that in. If you try and box select now, it'll just move that frame, so you could hit B, and then you could just grab this right here, and I'm just going to unselect that frame actually. So hit B again, and select these guys here, hit Control J to make another frame inside here, and let's call this the random, I don't know, X component. You can call it whatever you want, just as long as you understand what it's doing. And let's change the color of that as well, just by hitting in to get this shelf here, and click color. We can just choose a random color here. Doesn't really matter. Maybe let's choose one for the displacement in general as well. It'd be a very light yellow there. Now we're going to worry about the actual textures there. And I'm going to come out of the texture coordinate object again. I'm not going to worry about this mapping node. That's just going to control displacement there. And I'm going to bring in a noise texture, and we're just going to bring in 2 of these. So just connect those both to object. And then I'm also going to bring in a Musgrave texture, and I'll just place that right here. Again, object is going to be feeding in there. And I'm just going to adjust these slightly so a little easier to look at. In fact, maybe I should just go like this and run that into that noise texture there. It's a little better. Let's start with this Musgrave here. I'm going to set the scale to 14, the detail to 8, and the dimension to 0.1. So you can see this grungy kind of texture there. And then I'm going to create a couple color ramps. First of all, it's going to go into this one. Then it's going to go into 2 more. So this first color ramp, I'm going to set the bottom area. We'll leave that at black. And this second flag here, the one that's set to white, I'm going to bring this down to 0.014. And then change the value here. The hex code is going to be BF, 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 just like that. So it's a darker gray. You can see the value is 0.521. Then this bottom color ramp here, this is going to be the roughness of our metallic texture there. So the bottom flag, I'm going to put that at 0.35. and the top flag I'm going to leave at 1. Let's set the bottom value. That hex code is going to be 666666, just a whole bunch of sixes. It's like a middle gray color there. And this top one, we'll set this to 6 Cs. That's a lighter color there. And I'm going to create a second principled BSDF here. This is going to go into the base color, and this is going to go into the roughness. And I'm going to set the metallic on this one to 1. So let's set up this color ramp right here. This is going to be our color. We can kind of see how it's interacting with the sun here. We don't really want the black and the white so much from here, but we do want that to affect our color. So the bottom flag I'm going to put at 0.35, and the top one I'm going to leave at 1, just the same as this one here. But for this bottom flag here, you don't have to copy this exactly, but this is the hex code I had. It's 684A3D, and that's kind of a brownish color. And this second one here, this is going to be 33241E. And if we look at this now, we can see what we have. Here it is rendered out. Let's take a look at this noise texture now, the top one out of the two that we made. And I'm going to set the scale to 10 and the detail to 4. Actually, I'm going to set the scale to 20. It doesn't make a huge difference, but I found it looked a little bit better, a little higher frequency. I'm going to come out of the factor and go into a color ramp. I'll just place it right here. And I'm going to bring the bottom flag up to 0.5. And then we're going to set this hex value. Let's open that up at A6, A6, A6. And then this top one, we'll just leave that at white. And this is going to go into the roughness of this second principled BSDF here. This second noise texture is going to be for a bump map. And I'm going to set this really high frequency at 200. Again, I'm going to come out of the factor and I'm going to go into a color ramp. Just place it right here. The black flag we're going to bring up to 0.19, and then the white flag we're going to bring down to 0.33, and then I'm going to run this into a bump node. And that's going to go into the height there. Then I'll feed this into the normal on this guy here. Let's take a look at this one here. I'm going to change the strength to 0.2. And then the base color on this one as well. I'm just going to scroll down, change it to black. So this is just meant to be kind of like a matte rubber kind of area there. If you wanted it a little rougher, you could always scroll this up as well. Just get it completely matte. But I kind of liked the variation here. Next up, I just want to mix these two principled BSDFs together. So I'm going to hold down Control, Shift, and right-click and drag from one of these to the other. And it's just going to form this mix shader automatically. And then I'm going to run, so we've got these 4 multiply nodes here. I'm going to take this second to last one, right before this one that I set to 0.1. And let's view that. That might look pretty good to mix our stuff together. So let's try that out. I'm going to bring in a color ramp. Just place it right here. And I'm going to try and crush this a little bit so that we bring down this white value to really low, 0.001. I didn't select it properly, 0.001. And now we've got kind of white and black values. So let's try plugging this into the mix right here. Yeah, it's starting to look pretty good. One last thing I want to do is add an option for some lights here, just some emission shader stuff going on. To do that, I'm going to make a bit more room for myself, first of all, and then grab this color ramp that we just used to mix these two principled BSDFs together, and Control-Shift-D that guy, so we've got a new copy of it. And I'm just going to reset it. I'm going to have 3 points here, so I'm just going to add a third one. This one is going to be black. And so basically I'm going to have black, white, black, something like this here. This is going to be on the very bottom, that first one. This white is going to be really close. It's going to be 0.001, basically on top of it. And this one here is going to be 0.009. So let's look and see what this is doing. It's basically creating these white outlines around those buttons there. I'm going to plug this into the emission strength. And let's view our principled BSDF again, or the mix shader rather, and nothing's really happening yet because we want to change this emission color to something. So I'm just going to change it to white, and then I'm going to add a math node right here and change this to multiply, and then we can adjust the strength here. So I'm going to change this to 10, and let's render this out now. And it's looking really good. I really like the way the lights look, but let's look at one more option for that emission as well. I'm going to come out of the generated output from that texture coordinate node and go into a separate XYZ. And if we look at the Y, you can see a gradient going from one end to the other. And if we come out of generated, if we change the shape of this, it'll still go from one end to the other, which is kind of nice. So then I'm going to bring in a color ramp, place it right here, and change the bottom flag to some color. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to change RGB to HSV and change near to far. And so now we can see it's basically a spectrum from the green or yellowish green to the white, and then it takes its time. If we were to set this to near, it would go right there, but since we set it at far, it goes through some other colors first. Then I'm going to plug this into the emission on that bottom principled BSDF, and if you look at this now, we can see the light is that gradient. So I came in here and renamed a couple things as well, just to keep this a little easier to see. This is the random horizontal length, and this is the random height. Those are the two white noise textures that basically make it, so you can flip through those and get a whole bunch of different values for these shapes here. And then I also changed this to emission strength, this multiply that we set at 10. And let's go ahead and label this as well. Grab all that, hit Control J. Let's call that metal texture. And this one right here is, maybe rubber texture. There we go. Maybe we don't need these guys in there. If you have any points that you accidentally got inside the frame, just select those points, hit Alt-P. That goes for nodes and points, I guess. Let's change the color on these as well. That's going to be gray, and this one will be, I don't know, bluish. In fact, we could make it kind of the colors of, what we're working with there. Something like that. One last thing I should do to speed up the render time of this texture is change as many of these color ramps as I can to map range nodes. Anything that only has two flags and is just gray values, you can do a map range node instead. This one here you couldn't do because it's got color, and this one down here, for instance, like this one with all these ramps or all these flags, pardon me, you couldn't do that one. But you could do this one here, etc. So let's do a few of those. Up here we've got a color ramp. This is the one coming out of the Musgrave texture. And these are going to be the flag positions, and these are going to be the new values. So black is still at the bottom, so we don't have to change either of these zeros. But this one here, it's going to be at 0.014, and the value, let's look at that for a second. So it's 0.521 under hue saturation value. Just look at the V there. So 0.521, enter that in, and let's just check it out. Looks great. So now we can just plug this into these two areas here. Just get rid of this color ramp. Let's do this one as well. I'm going to grab another map range node, just place it right here. We'll run it into this guy. And so that top flag is going to be at 1. And let's see the value there, 0.604. And this bottom flag is at 0.35. And the value is 0.133. Looks great. So this is going to go into the roughness, and then I'll get rid of that color ramp there. For color ramps like this one here near the bottom that's set to constant, let's do this one here. I'm just going to set the flags basically at 0.96 and 0.961. Let's just see how similar these look to each other. Yeah, it's close enough that it's not going to make much of a difference in our final output. Ended up decreasing the amount of color ramps from 14 to 4, and especially if this gets more complicated, or if this is a bigger scene, that's really going to decrease the render time. So that's it for today. Hope you can see what I was doing and how you might change it around. The big areas here to pay attention to are like these white noise textures. Flipping through these will give huge variations on that final texture. Same with this random X component as well. That's going to change stuff quite a lot. Or this emission texture as well. Really quite a lot of stuff here. So, let me know if you have any questions. If you're confused about anything, I'll do what I can to, help you with that confusion. Thanks a lot for watching.